What a great night. This is West Tampa history, today's history, but entwined with so many years of love and dedication to this community. The love, the heartbeat, the soul of West Tampa is still alive and well. God bless each and all of you. 100 years ago, the West Tampa city ceased to exist. The mayor of the city of Tampa at that particular time was none other than Henriquez. And here we are in 2025, 100 years later, recognizing his great grandson as an outstanding citizen of this community, but especially a West Tampa favorite son. A 100 years ago, the independent city of West Tampa was the 5th largest city in the state of Florida. The city of Tampa was the 3rd largest city in the state of Florida. And when you combined the city of Tampa with the city of West Tampa, our city at that particular moment, 1925, 1926, 1927, became the 2nd largest city in the entire state of Florida, but especially Tampa became the economic engine of the west coast of Florida. It was already recognized as the Ellis Island of Florida. West Tampa made history with its men and women, and that heartbeat that started by Mr. McFarland when he looked over to Ybor City and said, if the Spaniards can do it on the east side of the Hillsborough River, I'm going to do it on the west side. And that was the birth of West Tampa. We have so many new young people in this audience today that compose the new West Tampa Chamber of Commerce that perhaps you don't appreciate the long love and dedication to this soil, which is the West Tampa community. Today we're recognizing Bob Henriquez, the great grandson of the last mayor of the city of West Tampa. He's receiving the George Guida Legacy Award. But so many people in this room have no idea who was George Guida. Why was someone so important to receive the dedicated memory award of the George Guida Legacy Award? I'm going to be very brief with you, but if the old mayor of the West Tampa that we knew 100 years ago could only speak to us from above, he would be quick to say, my great-grandson, Bob Henriquez, has dedicated more years to the betterment of this community than I did, and no one deserves it more than Bob Henriquez. For those of you that are new to West Tampa, for those of you that perhaps have not read much about the great history of this community, let me tell you that the Henriquez family has lived and served West Tampa and the city of Tampa for many, many years. I told Bob that in doing some research, I came across some old Key West newspapers that talked about his great-great-great-grandfather, who was the first to come to West Tampa, even before West Tampa became an independent city. Cecilio Henriquez was a cigar manufacturer down in Key West. He didn't have a big factory, but he had a small, what we now call Buckeyes, or the Spanish call Chinchal. He brought his Chinchal to West Tampa, that was not even a city at the time. That was January of 1894. That's how long the Henriquez roots have been producing dedicated public servants here in Tampa. Cecilio and his wife Asuncion came to West Tampa and started their own cigar factory. Cecilio's nickname was Chicho. Nobody had ever heard about Chicho except that newspaper from Key West many years ago that revealed his nickname. Chicho was a dedicated Cuban, dedicated to Cuba being an independent country. Unfortunately, he never did see the Cuban flag flying over Cuba because he died right after the Spanish-American War in 1899. But his son, Enrique, had already started in the same industry, in the cigar industry, and came to West Tampa. And it wasn't long that he was in West Tampa that he was elected to the West Tampa City Council, where he served many, many years. He served so many years in City Council that eventually he was elected mayor, repeatedly mayor, and as I said, on January 1 of 1925, he turned the key of West Tampa to Perry Wall, the mayor of the city of Tampa. From there, his son was Mario Sr., followed by Mario Jr., who was Bob's father. And Bob followed in those footsteps because as a fifth-generation West Tampa banana, he only knew how to do good. Serve your people. Serve honorably. And Bob Henriquez has done that. In my opinion, your selection committee selected very well. I don't know of anyone who deserves to be Mr. West Tampa, as George Guida was known. No one deserves it more than Bob Henriquez. He traces his roots in West Tampa all the way back to 1894. That's 131 years of a love affair with West Tampa. 5 generations of service, making our community a better place to live. But then again, the West Tampa Chamber of Commerce deserves recognition. West Tampa was an independent city when in October, in fact the 18th of October of 1913, that's 112 years ago today, they formed the West Tampa Commerce Club, and then it became the West Tampa Board of Trade. And then shortly thereafter, you adopted the name that you now are known by, the West Tampa Chamber. That happened just 2 months before the famous West Tampa Library that still stands there today, the oldest free, because they didn't use the word public back then. The free library was inaugurated in 1914. Across the street some years later, that became the George Guida and Palmira Guida store of appliances and Venetian blinds, and they were living upstairs where Caldico today has his conference room. My parents owned the West Tampa department store where Salcines Park is now. I used to walk that half a block and go upstairs to play with Frankie and Bibi and Lorraine and the 2 other girls. And I used to look from their balcony to the West Tampa Library where I did my homework so many, many days. Mrs. Empanada was talking about her family and her parents, Palmira Guida, Stella Alvarez, and Mrs. Webster were those that took care of cooking for us when we were elementary school students at the old St. Joseph Catholic School on Albany. We have so much to be grateful for and so proud to be West Tampa people. So when I heard that Henriquez's great-great-grandson was being recognized with the George Guida Award, I said, but wait a minute. We have so many new people in Tampa, and the West Tampa Chamber of Commerce has so many young people. Do they know what an outstanding citizen George Guida was? And the response was, EJ, this is your opportunity to explain just who George Guida was and why Bob Henriquez deserves this award so much. He was an extraordinary leader. He was 11 years old when Henriquez turned over the keys. By the way, the treasury of West Tampa was empty. But he turned over the keys to Perry Wall. And George Guida was there as an 11-year-old boy, the son of immigrants from Alessandra de la Rocca in Sicily. He had worked, the old man had worked in a cigar factory and then opened a small grocery store across the street from what became Morgan's Cigar Factory. The building is still there. It was George Guida that as a young boy was brought by his father to my father, Emiliano Salcines, an immigrant from Spain. And old man Guida asked my father, would you please train George on how to sell merchandise, because my father was working for Salomon Simovitz. If you go down Main Street and just before you get to Albany, you see a tall building. You see at the top marquee, the Simovitz building. That's where a young 15-year-old boy called George Guida, started working with Emiliano Salcines, and they became so close that it was more than just a father and a son. It was a fraternity between them. It wasn't long after that my father married my mother, and George Guida married Palmira. I was born just before Frankie was born. Frankie was born just before Pearl Harbor, and both of our parents had decided they weren't moving from West Tampa. They were staying on Main Street and Howard and Union. With time, the old A&P grocery store became the George Guida store directly across the street from the West Tampa post office that we all do business with. George Guida had a tremendous vision. He was a man that was dedicated to construction. Before you knew it, Jesuit had moved from downtown Tampa. In 1956, in late summer, down the street from where we are today, they opened up the new Jesuit high school on a street that was not very well known at the time, called Himes. George Guida realized there was no field house. He built the field house. Lorraine, his young daughter, was studying at St. Joseph, and the nuns had no convent. They had been living in an old, dilapidated wooden cigar factory for 20 years. And George Guida, with his imagination and his determination and fundraising ability, he built the convent for the St. Joseph nuns. When you go to St. Joseph Mass, right behind that convent, that church is the convent that George Guida built. And then there was a small boys' club on Union, not far from the Methodist Church. And George Guida said, as the West Tampa Optimist Club got started in 1948, why don't we build a new Boys and Girls Club? And the Boys and Girls Club became a reality because of George Guida and his friends, his buddies, with the Optimist Club. That was when MacDill was called Lisbon, before they finally opened up MacDill all the way across and they eliminated the word Lisbon. There was a bank in West Tampa right across the street from where the Salcines Park is now. That was the State Bank of West Tampa. And it was George Guida and his friends that said, this bank is growing so fast, we need a new bank. And the bank was created on the corner of Howard and Grand Central. Grand Central. In 1963, Kennedy came by, and we changed the name of Grand Central and we call it John F. Kennedy. But we retained the name of the bank, Central Bank, because of Grand Central. George Guida was an active board member there. Many of your parents, many of your grandparents came to see George asking for loans so that they could have a mortgage, so that they could have a contract for deed and eventually own their own homes. George Guida did that and so much more. So when the West Tampa Chamber of Commerce recognized the value of George Guida, they said, this meritorious award should carry the name of an outstanding citizen, a dedicated West Tampa son, a favorite son. The Guida family is here tonight. I would ask all of you to applaud, and would the Guida family please stand up? Let us recognize you. And then your committee had to decide who should receive this coveted award. I'm told that it wasn't a very lengthy session because Bob Henriquez not only dedicated himself to public service. Do you realize he has been serving the people of Hillsborough County, but especially proud of West Tampa, for 30 years, longer than his great-grandfather. That was the last mayor of West Tampa, a graduate of Most Holy Redeemer, and then Tampa Catholic, and then Princeton University. And then he came back and not only was an outstanding coach and leader and mentor of young people, he was the head coach at Tampa Catholic. And it was then that the people of West Tampa said, "We need you in Tallahassee." And he was elected to the House of Representatives, 4 terms. And then the state of Florida tapped him and said, "We need you over in the Pinellas Pasco Children's Services." And he became the administrator there. And then came here again and was elected as our property appraiser. If anybody deserves this coveted George Guida award, it's our friend Bob Henriquez. Let's welcome, with a West Tampa welcome, the Honorable Bob Henriquez.